Molly woke with a gasp, her nightmare fading into darkness. She reached reflexively under her pillow for her phone. 317 glowed in large numbers, filling her with relief. Just a bad dream brought on by stress from upcoming finals. As Molly sat up in her small dorm room bed, she stretched slowly, trying to ease the lingering anxiety. Her roommate Emma was away for the weekend at another university for a conference, and Molly convinced herself she missed the girls' quiet nighttime breathing and occasional moments of laughter from watching funny videos in bed together. Molly turned, placing her bare feet on the cold wooden floor when she heard it, a scraping sound, like something heavy slowly dragging. Her stomach dropped with realization. The noise was coming from the hallway. It couldn't be Emma after all. Pulse quickening, Molly leapt up and rushed to flip the light switch, expecting to confront an overly playful drunk floormate. But the hallway stood empty, fluorescent bulbs buzzing faintly. Leaning against the doorframe, Molly peered around perplexed, seeing no movement or shadow, though the scuffing sound still circled directly behind her closed door, as if someone, or something, waited just on the other side. Molly slammed her room door and double-bolted it, heart racing. Her mind went to unfathomable places from horror movies she loved, yet terrified her. But this was no film fantasy. Someone or something was here on her dorm floor in the dead of night. Gasping in jagged breaths, Molly stumbled to her window facing the sprawling campus green and fumbled to open it for fresh air. Her hands shook violently as she grasped the cold window frame. Through wind-rustled tree branches, Molly noticed an unusual number of campus security vehicles, flashing eerie red and blue lights clustered around the student center. Peering closer, her gaze landed on a lone figure walking briskly across the quad, too slim for security. The young blonde woman wore a wrinkled campus staff shirt and strained under the weight of several overstuffed boxes leaving the building. Dread sank, cold and heavy inside Molly. That was the campus HR director, and something was very wrong. Spinning away from the window, Molly eyed her silent cell phone abandoned on her bed. Should she call emergency services? What if they thought she was crazy, overreacting, or still dreaming? Turning in circles, Molly strained again for any sound in the hallway. Hearing nothing but her own shrill breath, she cautiously approached the door. Before touching the handle, Molly's phone vibrated violently atop rumpled sheets, pulsing in the darkness. The screen glowed ominously, not with a friend's call, but a campus-wide alert tone Molly had only heard used once for a major snowstorm. Hands trembling, she swiped at the message as reality crashed around her. Dangerous intruder reported on premises. The college is on full lockdown. Do not leave your room. Clapping a hand over her mouth to repress a scream, Molly looked desperately around her cramped dorm. There was nowhere to hide, no escape from the small space she now shared with an armed killer. Heartbeat roaring in her ears, Molly rushed to flip off the light switch, hoping darkness might shield her somehow. Crouched freezing on the floor between her extra-long twin bed and the wall, Molly tried calming her ragged breath. She strained to hear past it for any betraying sounds of her doorknob turning or wood splintering under force. But only eerie silence answered. Minutes stretched endlessly as Molly's mind spun wild images of a gruesome figure axing through her barricaded door to end her life as easily as her psychology homework laid half-finished on the desk. She squeezed her eyes tight, body quaking until she heard the first faint sounds of running footsteps and commands shouted through bullhorns outside. The police had arrived. Bursting into panicked tears, Molly crawled from her hiding space toward the barred window as relief flooded through her. She pushed open the glass pane, watching dozens of officers pour from vans, spotlights strafing building walls in search of the dorm intruder still loose somewhere inside. Molly slumped weakly to the floor, peering out through wet eyelashes, as flashing reflections revealed the police dragging a hooded figure from campus shrubbery into custody at last. Though Molly resisted sleep the remaining night, soothing daylight gradually returned campus life back to comforting bustle and routine. But each quiet darkness still carried faint echoes of that harrowing night when true, unimaginable horror had crawled right up to her door. Crisp autumn leaves skittered across sidewalks and browned grass as students hustled to class against chilling wind. The old campus buildings watched impassively, weathered stone exhaling remnants of past knowledge seekers who also braved biting seasons in this quiet college town. Striding briskly, Junior Cassie pulled her scarf tighter and squinted against the cold sun. She was running late to 19th century literature again thanks to her roommate begging for help understanding physics equations. The campus green stretched out peaceful as always on her short cut across the quadrangle. Glancing at the large sycamore trees dotting the lawn, Cassie noted their remaining leaves shivering on naked branches, waiting for impending winter. But as she passed the last spindly tree, Cassie noticed a strange dark mass near the base, half hidden by raised roots. She paused, wary of students napping off hangovers in odd spots as midterms ended, but drawing closer, Cassie gasped. The shape was no drunken student. Wedged amongst thick, gnarled roots lay a mangled deer carcass, throat savagely torn open. Dark blood-soaked dead leaves surrounding the animal. Fighting nausea, Cassie staggered backwards in alarm. What could have violently killed a large deer on campus overnight? Just then, Cassie's friend Leo came bounding down the library steps, his arms bursting with ancient texts for their joint research project. Spotting Cassie frozen by the sycamore, his round face creased anxiously behind silver glasses. "Cass, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Together, Cassie and Leo reported the gruesome deer carcass to campus security. But with no proof a crime occurred, their report was quickly forgotten when a missing student took precedence the next day. As chilling rain pounded the aged brick buildings over the following week, studying in her room. Friday night, Cassie's contemplation was shattered by a campus-wide alert heralding lockdown orders. The alert warned students to avoid going outside after dark due to dangerous unknown assailants. Cassie quickly shut and locked her window facing the quad below. The next morning brought an eccentric religion professor barring into Cassie's advanced literary class ranting about ravenous demons overrunning the school. He claimed a cloven-hooved shadow creature attacked him by the campus chapel, leaving him with shredded clothes and a bite mark on his abdomen. Scornful laughter followed the clearly delusional man out, but that evening brought chilling validation. Guttural screams and breaking glass erupted from Cassie's dormitory. Students flooding the hallway in panic described a crazed girl they recognized attacking people seemingly unprovoked. Campus security whisked the deranged student away, leaving nervous questions in her wake. The bizarre attacks escalated over the next week, resulting in 3 more students exhibiting insane violent behavior around campus. They were restrained and quarantined off-site, according to officials, while the CDC investigated an unknown rabies-like pathogen. Yet at student gatherings, fearful whispers swirled that those students went mad after encountering the same sinister creature lurking campus grounds. Some even claimed to glimpse hoofprints tangled peculiarly with human shoe tracks after recent assaults, leading back to the mutilated carcass under the sprawling sycamore. As a harsh winter night fell early across the emptied quadrangle, an eerie stillness matched the barren trees, casting claw-like shadows. But inside ivy-laced brick buildings, panic brewed amongst students, ordered to remain confined for safety. Cassie sat tensely on her bed while students rushed up and down the hallway, shouting competing stories over each other about the nightmarish thing glimpsed right before someone else vanished. Gazing out her frosty window, Cassie suddenly spotted a horned form watching from the darkness below. Scrambling back in terror, she saw fogged glass now held a clawed smudge from where a twisted face had peered closely in at her room. Gasping aloud at the implications, Cassie realized the true demonic horror was already inside these once hallowed halls. Deep in the bustling heart of Amherst College's campus stands an imposing stone pedestrian bridge stretching over the slow-trickling waters of the Hickory River. For over a century, the Alston Arch Bridge carried students swiftly from dorms and cafeterias to hallowed academic buildings nestled on the opposite banks of Amherst's historic grounds. But beneath the ivy climbing the august walls of Amherst hides shadows of darkness and long-kept secrets. No student ever suspected the Alston Arch and its surging tide of foot traffic also forced those in adjacent realms to traverse between boundaries, until now. For in its 125-year reign, the Alston Arch has invoked a curse on those daring to cross from light to shadow upon its smooth granite stones. Senior Sydney was among the first to suspect, after witnessing her roommate transform from conscientious introvert to temperamental risk-taker virtually overnight after using the bridge daily. As weeks passed, the normally shy girl grew defiant with Sydney and combative with professors. Soon, angry red scratches and bites marred her once pristine skin. Rumors stirred Sydney had seen her roommate consorting with demonic forces, but darker discoveries were yet to come. By late October, as skeletal trees shed their splendor, panic emerged in the Amherst campus community. Students began reporting disturbing encounters in the locked rare books archive, leading to 4 hospitalizations from falling shelves and caustic chemical spills. Then a cafeteria cook burst screaming into a donor gala that locals glimpsed shadowy beasts brawling with glowing white knights in the woods beyond campus turrets. Elders dismissed the woman's claims as delirium from drinking on empty stomachs, but inside, diners knew Hillary never touched liquor and had regularly organized the yearly galas without such frenzied ravings before. As unease settled thickly as fog drifting off the nearby river, College President Cyrus Kraft presided over public safety announcements, citing the need for dusk to dawn restrictions around campus. But whispers swirled around craft beer paints that Amherst's esteemed leader also recently took up daily passage over the Allstone Arch Bridge from his Riverside apartment to Main Hall headquarters. Eyewitnesses swore Kraft's brown coiffure now looked suspiciously darker in hue. Soon emergency council meetings erupted as 2 students plummeted tragically from high dormitory windows overnight, joining 9 others over recent months suffering catastrophes after crossing the arch. Among hushed voices and lowered eyes emerged increasing pleas to close the lethal bridge. But President Kraft refused for reasons no one comprehended amidst the turmoil. Twilight fell early over Amherst's sprawling grounds when Sydney and 3 student council leaders confronted Kraft in his wood-paneled office. Kraft watched with hooded eyes as Sydney calmly presented her case for demolishing the Allston Arch immediately to halt loss of precious student life. Her fellow classmates stood somberly behind in support. After Sydney's impassioned speech to rapt silence, Cyrus Kraft rose slowly from his tufted leather chair circled by ancient volumes. As the last purpling rays set behind wavy antique glass, his eyes took on a fiery glow like embers stoked from glowing coals. With reflexes no mortal should possess, Kraft shot out one sinewy arm in suggestion of a Campfire Tales jump scare ending. The senior student body president collapsed instantly to plush Persian carpet, limbs grotesquely askew in death. Shock riveted Kraft's guests to their floor spots. Cruel lips then curled, revealing shadows of horror, worse than any fiction they had studied. We who guard passageways cannot allow their closing, now that so many delightful visitors get welcome through unchecked. This college shall soon overflow gloriously with my legions unleashed from realms beyond. As awful comprehension dawned for Sydney regarding the tragic fates of all recent crossers over that damned bridge outside, she knew instantly that Amherst campus must fully lock down against this gathering doom, both from without and tragically now from within. Baxter College was renowned in the quiet New England town for its prestigious pre-med program embedded within heavily wooded acres, edged by the swirling Quinnipiac River. Students flocked eagerly to the modern glass and steel bioresearch building, glowing impressive even against the 19th century brick ivy-laced campus. Senior student April had spent nearly every waking hour this past year slaving over a delicate cancer research trial in Lab 6A, under the stern eye of Dr. Yang Jiang, her thesis advisor. Though brilliant, Dr. Jiang ran his elite lab with an iron fist and perfectionist standards. April struggled desperately to finalize her complex 50-page study for publication by graduation to secure the medical school of her dreams. It was nearly midnight when April startled from anxious notes scattered around her sterile lab bench. Was that hurried footsteps echoing from the restricted viral storage bay just down the deserted hallway? Squinting against glaring fluorescence, April rose slowly, stiff from hours bent over swirling Petri dishes glowing faintly. Eerie silence had descended over the huge research building. Surely all other students had gone home by now, with experiments safeguarded. But the air held an indefinable charge, as if awaiting a gathering storm. Shivering slightly, April flipped her long ponytail over one shoulder and crept on socked feet to peer cautiously around the hallway corner, towards the large titanium cold storage room, barred from unauthorized entry. April drew a sharp breath. The reinforced doors now gaped open, issuing wisps of cool mist that licked over glossy floors. What had been unleashed into these after-hour corridors? Heart-pounding, April stumbled back from the startling sight. She whirled towards the emergency eye wash station on her lab wall, out of long habit. But even as she yanked the metal handle, ice shot through April's veins, realizing water wouldn't wash this unseen contaminant away if her worst fears proved true. Racing back to her lab bench, April fumbled for her smartphone tethered to a nearby charging port. She had to call campus security immediately before this potential outbreak worsened, but her device only displayed an ominous message icon, which April opened with suddenly trembling fingers. Bio Research Center now under full quarantine per CDC. Unknown organic contagion released from Lab 6B vault. Full hazmat lockdown underway. Stand by for further instruction. The CDC? Here? April collapsed into her desk chair, mind-reeling scenarios involving human error or sabotage in the neighboring microbiology lab. Had a deadly supervirus escaped captivity to silently multiply beyond glass cages? The emptied hallway seemed to lurk with unseen menace. Before April could connect coordinates through escalating panic, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the long hallway, followed by violent thrashing sounds against metal lockers. April cowered behind her lab door, breaths coming in panicked gulps peering through the slim glass pane. Moments later, two hazmat personnel dragged a limp graduate anatomy student away, leaving a crimson smear trail where his head had pounded relentlessly against steel moments before. Over the next excruciating 48 hours under CDC quarantine, April hid terrified in her sealed lab, using the secured landline phone to call her parents with updates she barely understood. Food and other provisions arrived silently outside her locked door twice a day, by faceless figures in bulging suits wired to oxygen tanks. April sorted vague details as a dangerous neurotropic virus escaped its high-level containment unexpectedly, perhaps abetted by a disgruntled employee. Its contamination created what officials called cerebral chaos. Essentially, it drove its victims violently mad. April resisted sleep to avoid nightmares involving blood-streaked academics in shredded lab coats, stalking the contaminated halls beyond her barricaded door. But finally, exhaustion claimed her slumped on a sterile floor strewn with biohazard wrappers. There, April dreamt the air vents hissed warnings that she had also become infected simply by residing at Ground Zero, too long for the incubation period. Awakening with a choked cry, April knew she had to escape the research building immediately before her brain also unraveled with murderous confusion from this swept-under outbreak disaster. Jamming open an emergency stairwell exit, April descended carpeted steps 2 at a time, fleeing towards the river. Misted night beyond those shattered glass doors, which promised sanity, lay just on the other side of dawn. Golden afternoon light filtered through stained glass panes inside Perkins Hall's elaborate Gothic dormitory as Jenny flipped through course catalogs for next semester. Curled on an antique settee in the quiet common room, Jenny contemplated dropping pre-law for creative writing before graduation, like her free-spirited roommate Zoe suggested, as the setting sun drifted lower, casting eerie shadows on ornate walls from heavy oak furniture. Jenny stretched stiff limbs. She should rejoin the real world to eat dinner, or at least call her mom, who fretted over Jenny staying in this dorm rumored as haunted. But Jenny shrugged off the campus myth that a depressed 1960s student named Sarah still roamed the building, pining for her dead sweetheart away at war. Returning upstairs to her room just before dusk, though, Jenny felt an unnatural chill, like ghosts trailed up the winding steps behind her. She turned quickly on the landing, peering down into the gathering gloom, holding her breath. Nothing lurked there except fluttering cobwebs in eternal corners. Jenny exhaled, feeling silly to indulge fanciful impressions from her Gothic surroundings. This dorm was likely just drafty from tall windows clouding with impending nightfall. With rational explanations restored, Jenny turned the final corner towards her open door, already glowing invitingly just down the creaking hallway. She was just passing the communal bathroom, when Jenny heard weeping echo softly from inside the supposedly empty room. She froze, goosebumps rising as the tragic sound persisted, permeating the darkening hall. A girl's muted voice filled with despair from beyond the solid wooden door. "My James, why? How can I go on without you?" Jenny fled down the corridor, nearly stumbling on the ornate Turkish runner in shock. She burst through her doorway, heart hammering wildly. Could Sarah's lovelorn ghost actually haunt Perkins Hall, still mourning her dead soldier? Jenny's roommate Zoe jumped up, startled amid yoga poses on an embroidered rug between their twin beds. Her eyebrows knit with concern behind blonde bangs at Jenny's panicked state, whispering about the eerie encounter by the bathroom. As the roommates stood frozen in uncertainty about whether to investigate further, the overhead light bulb suddenly flared wildly, then popped, plunging them into shadow. They clung to each other, breaths held, listening intensely. A loud thud echoed from the common room below, followed by dragging footsteps circling under the floorboards. Jenny pictured Sarah's broken form, drifting aimlessly through the abandoned lower level, still crying for her beloved James. When Zoe regained speech, she urgently suggested calling campus security. But with cell reception notoriously spotty inside the aged dorm, they crept downstairs together, using Zoe's phone, flashlight dimmed to conserve battery. Rounding the corner by the empty fireplace, they discovered fresh flowers and burning candles arranged on the mantel, offerings to someone deceased. Jenny exhaled slowly, realizing the room itself held no unseen presence, just signs fellow dorm residents were perhaps coaxing spiritual activity with their makeshift memorial. She turned towards Zoe to gauge her reaction when freezing air swept past them, carrying the scent of lavender perfume. Behind Zoe's shoulder stood the gauzy outline of a 1960s college girl staring forlornly at the candle flames. Screaming, Jenny stumbled backwards, then froze like prey when the ghost girl's dead gaze met her own. Zoe stood paralyzed under Sarah's translucent palm, hovering inches from her blonde hair. But instead of harming them, the anguished spirit glided soundlessly to an antique desk, harboring photographs of laughing students long departed from Perkins Hall's sheltering arms. Sarah's phantom form sat mournfully grasping a framed black-and-white image of an athletic young cadet. Tenderness and profound loss shadowed her time-worn features as she caressed the picture of her beloved killed in Vietnam weeks before their marriage, abandoning her to walk the mortal plane eternally in solitude. Overwhelmed by pity, Jenny found courage to approach the specter, transmitting unspeakable grief across the decades into Perkins Hall's very bones. Speaking gently, Jenny suggested Sarah needn't cling to this existence pining for James any longer. Perhaps instead, she might transition peacefully into the next realm with support from the spirit team. Jenny sensed gathering in the flickering candlelight. Slowly, Sarah raised her head, eyes glistening with ghostly tears. But behind the mournful glaze flickered dawning possibility of finally releasing her aching heart after half a century of sorrow. Turning back a final moment to gaze at James' cropped brown hair and crooked smile frozen in time, Sarah then slowly faded into streaked moonlight through the vaulted stained glass window. No more would her restless spirit require memorial from the living. As the roommates stood awed in Sarah's fading wake, a campus security officer arrived in answer to lost cell calls about supernatural incidents. But with the ghostly girl now transitioned gently on, Jenny merely smiled up at the grooved ceiling molding with a whispered farewell to one so long bound within Perkins Hall.